Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cybergizmo, we're going to install a GUI to help us manage Docker right after this. So what we're going to do today is install Portainer, which is one of many different applications in the open source that you can use to graphically manage, or actually through a web browser, to manage your Docker engines. It's in the location is www.portainer.io. I'll put that in the show notes below so that you can go to that site if you want. Or you can just do a search for Portainer. Either one will get you there. And so it will run on Linux, it'll run on Windows, and it runs on OS 10. And so we're going to go and look at the instructions to do this. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can install this, but the first way is the simplest. And so the first thing we want to do is we'll want to create a volume, which is an area on my host that is hosting Docker. It is a disk area that I'm going to save off and connect to the container to allow Portainer to store persistent data, users, groups, maybe my security rules and other things that I'm going to set inside of Portainer and want to keep those from one start to another, one restart of the system to another. And in this case today, you can install Portainer as a standalone app if you want to do that. We're just going to install it as a container since that's very simple and easy to do. And since we're starting out with this, let's keep things simple so that we don't get too many things that are complicated in the way and confuse everything up. So let me go over to my shell script, and we will go and get logged into the environment. And I have created a shell script here called Portainer install, and in there, I'll just go ahead and list this for you. So as you can see, there's the two commands that are on the site to create the persistent data and then to actually deploy it. So we'll go ahead and run that. And at this point, I should have, yes, I have Portainer that's running and the host is exposed on port 9000. So we're done with the shell today. We can go back to the web browser and we'll do that. Let's go ahead and open a new tab. The first time you actually log into Portainer, it will ask you to create an initial account. You can make this whatever you want. It defaults to admin. I'm just going to leave it there for today. You, on the other hand, can choose whatever user you would like to use. It's always probably good not to use admin. It's probably better to just create something of your own. It just provides one more layer of security. And I don't need all that. So the next step, this happens only on the first time that you launch this, is it will ask us to connect the Portainer system to an existing Docker environment. So you have some choices. You can deploy it locally. You can deploy it remote. In other words, I have a Docker image which is running somewhere else that I want to connect to. And so you can have one or more of those, but that's beyond the scope of what I want to do today. That requires TLS to be set up in the enterprise in order for the Docker engines to communicate with one another. And so I can do that later if you like, but for right now, I just, again, want to keep things simple. The agents are used to, if you don't have the Docker engine installed, but you do have the Docker CLIs installed and you want to manage those as well, you can deploy the container agent on those systems, and it will allow you to execute commands on that particular client. You can also connect it to Azure if you want. I don't know if they have plans to add AWS in here or not. I would imagine that would probably be done through Kubernetes. You might look at Rancher as a possible GUI if you want additional capabilities. Rancher actually does provide support for Kubernetes, and in fact, that's its primary way of doing things. Rancher used to just manage Docker, but they, as all things do over time, they change and improve, and so Rancher now goes through the Kubernetes model in order to do that. So if you're looking to deploy in other environments with Kubernetes, you might look at Rancher over Portainer. Portainer does not support Kubernetes just yet. So I'm just going to do this on a local environment, and we'll just connect it, and we should get back to our dashboard at this point. And this time we have our first endpoint. This is an endpoint, and you can have as many endpoints as you need, but again, you'll need to set up TLS if you're going to have remotes in here. So let's go, and if I click on the endpoint, it will then give me some information about what's going on inside. I have no stacks, which would be stacks of applications that are deployed with Docker Compose. I don't have any because we haven't done anything with those yet. I have 2 containers that are currently deployed. One's running and one's stopped. I have one volume, which is the volume we created for Portainer, the Portainer data. I don't have any services. Again, that would be deployed through Docker Compose. And then I have 4 images that are out here, 2 that are used and 2 that are unused. So I have Debian installed. I have our friendly hello that we did last time, and then the default hello world to test this out with, and of course Portainer as an image as well. So if let's go, while we're here, why don't we just go ahead and deploy one? Now, in this case, unlike doing this from the command line, you have to give it a tag. And so I want the latest version of, now if you deploy this from the command line, it assumes that you want latest. But in the case of Portainer, it doesn't assume. It says, you tell me which one you want. And so we'll go ahead and get that. Yeah, it says that, but that's a lie. If I put in Ubuntu by itself, it will fail. And then, of course, that deployed from the Docker Hub. And there's my image down here as Ubuntu latest. So let's go back to our dashboard. We see we now have 5 images, and we want to let's look at networks before we go to containers. So if you're managing this is the default setup with Docker that it's reading, and so you have one bridge, one gateway bridge, the host network, an ingress network, which is the network that allows swarms to execute in, and then a local network, which of course have nothing in it other than it just allows connections to the local host. These also have a set of firewall rules with them through IP tables. Docker manages IP tables for the permissions through the network. So if you want to make modifications to that, you can do that here. If you want to add additional things like VLANs or additional networks, then of course you would do that here as well. We're not going to do that today. We're just keeping things simple. So we'll go over here to our containers, and I see we have Portainer running and we have Debian that's stopped. But I want to actually deploy a container in this environment because we just brought down Ubuntu. So let's go do that one. Now I can start typing here, and it knows I have an image in my library, so it starts with U, and it says, do you want that one? And I said, yep, I do. It gives me which network I want to push to, which is I want to publish to a new network port. And then there's some access controls here that you can set up. You can make it for administrators or restricted environments. And Portainer uses RBAC, and that's relatively new. And that's something that we can cover in the future, but that's role-based access controls. But, we won't do that just yet. So down here, you'll notice a couple of things. First is the command. Now, if you remember when we did Ubuntu last time, we did a -LT, we did a Docker run -LT, Ubuntu latest, and then we put a bash at the end of it. So the bash is the command that we want to run if we do an attach or to the container. So by default, it'll bring up a shell for us. The LT is right here. Now I could just say I just want the TTY, or I just want an interactive, or I don't want anything, which is the default. But we want to have this on because otherwise I won't be able to attach to the container and have it display anything in a terminal window. We'll go ahead and we'll do the deployment. So it completed successfully. And then you'll notice that we have the name, we have the state, we have this quick action stuff. If this was part of a stack, it would be in here. This is the image, this is the creation and the IPs and so forth. But you'll notice this quick action on here. Now, I won't have anything in the logs, but if I did, it would show that I have some log entries down here. Now, there might be some for Portainer. Let's go look. Yeah. So there's some things here that it's logged for Portainer, and this just gives you a quick way of looking at the logs that are in the system if you need to debug something or you just want to see what's going on. There's also some basic information about the container that you can find out some additional things like where it's hosted, where its path is. Maybe you're interested in what its configuration is. And so we can look at that. And we can also look at, maybe I'm interested in if I have any mounts. I don't, other than the standard Ubuntu one. If I had host mounts that I was performing, I could look and see what was set in there. Let's go back and let's look at the next one, which is the stats. This will take a little bit to actually refresh and get us anything meaningful. Now, of course, there's not anything going on in that container, so it's probably not going to be too busy. But it shows memory usage, CPU, and then network usage as well. It shows how many processes are currently in use on that container. Again, not a lot. So let's go do the last one. And you can set the refresh rate to whatever time frame you want to see the stats update in. So it knows that I have a command bash already because we told it that when we deployed the image to the container, and it has a default user root. If I have now, of course, I haven't deployed it. I haven't added any users. I haven't deployed any apps, and so I'm just going to get the default. And so I get a little shell window here. And that's why you want to be careful and protect this, because you can you could potentially expose a shell environment to the outside world. Don't put Portainer visible to the internet. Don't do that. Not without having a VLAN associated with it and a VPN to cross the bridges. Absolutely don't do that, and unless you have some kind of proxy or something that is allowing for 2FA to get into your environment. Don't rely on a password to cross your enterprise into your enterprise environment from the internet ever. I think I've said that before. I'll keep repeating it. Maybe eventually people will learn not to do that, and we won't have to read about people having their file systems encrypted anymore, at least for the short term. So right now I'm inside of the Ubuntu environment, and I can do whatever I want in here. I can add apps or compile applications, whatever I need to do at this point. Now, if I exit, normally, if I was on the command line, this would stop the container. But in this case, under Portainer, it actually does a detach. So this is still running. I can go back, and you'll notice that that is still running. If I had done the exit on the command line, it would have stopped the container. And I can reattach, and this is going to create a new instance, but it's still, I can come in and out, and that's no problem at all. So I think that's enough about that. Let's go see what else we can do here. I don't have any configs. I have lots of secrets, but none that I'm going to show you. Let's see. The swarm, I can manage a swarm from within here. And of course, that requires Docker Compose to be installed on your system to help manage that. There are a number of extensions. You can add role-based access controls. You can configure Portainer to authenticate with an external authentication server that can be LDAP or Active Directory or any other OAuth enabled applications. You can also manage your registry, which would be if I wanted to do in-app registry management, which in this case, I don't really care about that too much. You can create users, delete users, change their roles, and so forth. I can also create teams, and this is useful if you just want to have Docker containers that are being used by a group of people and you don't want anyone else to be able to get in to those containers. It might be just a development group that you want to make sure that only the people responsible for working on the code are able to see it, or managers that you're allowing in order to view progress on the code base if they're interested. Usually they're not. And then what roles I want. I can have help desk and read-only, standard user, and so forth. This would be where I would add additional endpoints if I wanted to manage those. But like I said before, you would need to set up a TLS environment to do that. If I have set up any registries, they would appear here. I don't have any, except for Docker Hub. And then I have some settings. You can set up snapshot intervals in your applications, which is nice, so that if you need to roll back, you can do that pretty easily. There's also the concept of templates, just like you have in virtual machines, so that if I set up a custom environment, I can save off a template of that and then redeploy that and not have to go through the steps to get it back to that point again. You have some security and then edge, which is totally different, and that's an advanced topic, not going to cover that today. And the ability to hide containers, which that's a dangerous setting in my mind. So I think I'm going to stop there. If there's something in particular you would like to see, or maybe a different GUI container, Portainer does a lot. It's not it can be very simple from a straightforward standpoint of managing images and containers on a single client, single Docker engine, to very complex to managing an entire enterprise. And it can manage swarms, it can manage stacks, it can manage services. So it's a very nice middle road kind of an application, probably useful in a development test environment more so than in publishing to a production environment, because in production environments you're going to be worried about things like uptime and failover support and being able to scale to the load. And so typically you're going to be looking at Kubernetes to do that. So I hope you enjoyed this today. And if you did, please like and subscribe. And as always, hope to see you again real soon, and bye for now.